Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's NABC High School Coach webinar presented by FastModel. I'm your host, Marshall Cho, and I'm currently serving as a National Ambassador for High School Coaches on the behalf of the NABC. If you have any questions for our speakers today, please put them in the Q&A feature, and we'll get it to you as soon as best as we can later in the webinar. Many of you in this webinar are active NABC members. If you're not yet a member, high school coaches can join for just $40. Visit nabc.com/membership to learn more. Before I introduce our panel, I want to take a moment to thank FastModel for their support of the NABC and this webinar series. We're excited to be joined again today by Phil Gall, who will share a few words about how FastModel supports coaches. Welcome, Phil.
Thanks, Marshall. Happy to be here. And thank you, all these coaches being on the panel, and thank you for joining us. Want to give a brief overview of FastModel Sports. We have two softwares for coaches to use, really help coaches streamline their workflows and help, continue to grow the game of basketball, especially at the youth level and the high school level. We have FastDraw. It's the #1 diagramming software. We have a free play bank for coaches to use and easily send those to their FastDraw account, which we really enjoy, supplying all those plays and diagrams for coaches to, use their FastDraw account to create plays, playbooks, and now you can animate even in the FastDraw program. FastScout helps coaches create practice plans and scouting reports. We have video integrations that help coaches attach videos, helps players learn, because you can even send plays, scouting reports, practice plans right to players' mobile apps using the FastScout mobile app. And we're excited to have a high school package that allows coaches to easily create scouting reports with, opponent logos and have their schedule right there in one place. So excited to be here tonight and listen to these great coaches. Thank you to NABC and yourself, Marshall, for hosting tonight.
Thanks, Phil. Appreciate that. And thanks again to our friends at FastModel. So with that, let me introduce our panel. And by introduce, I mean, I want to keep this brief because I want to give each of these coaches with their distinguished careers and long resumes a chance to share their stories a little bit. We have from the West Coast, Coach Dave Rubivo of Harvard-Westlake. Coach, how we doing today? Just tuning into us. So gracious with your time after a practice. We'll get you introduced here in a minute or give you the time. We have Alan Whitehart from Atlanta, Georgia, head coach at Milton with us as well. Coach Whitehart, how you doing today?
I'm doing good. Thanks for having me.
Doing great. Awesome. And then last but not least, Mike Mannix from Wilbraham and Munson Academy in Massachusetts. How are we doing today, Coach?
Good, Marshall. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. So just a quick intro with Coach Rubivo. I think I was a little nervous, so I didn't even mention what school you're coaching at. But I'll give you a chance to get to it. I know you have a little bit of college experience, being a head coach prior to that as well. So why don't you tell the audience a little bit about your journey and yourself?
Yeah. I'm David Rubivo, head coach at Harvard-Westlake School, Studio City, California. Been here for 10 years now. Prior to that, I was at the University of San Francisco for 2 years. And then prior to that, I was high school coach again at El Camino Real High School for 6 years. Just the opportunity to impact, I think, we're all teachers and we all have an opportunity to impact, but at the high school level, to see that development and that process-oriented growth take place, it's just something that fuels me and something that I've loved, and I've enjoyed every minute being back in high school and then being at Harvard-Westlake.
Awesome. Thank you for that. You and I both had the WCC badge for 2 years as well, because I did University of Portland for 2 years and found myself back in the high school game real quick. But we'll touch on that a little bit as we get onto the hour, hopefully.
Okay. Look forward to it.
Awesome. Coach Whitehart, you're tuning in to us from Atlanta, Georgia. Tell us about yourself and what you've been up to these days.
This year marks my 18th year. Started out at Centennial High School back in the early 2000s. Was successful there. Moved on to Buford, Georgia, Buford High School, more of a football powerhouse nationally than they are basketball. Was there for 5. Actually took a year off. My son was a kindergartner at the time. I coached 5-year-olds, and I realized how much harder that was than coaching high school kids. After a year out in corporate sales, took a job for a year at Etowah High School. Then Milton came calling. Milton had been pretty much of a powerhouse in Georgia previous to me, and I was fortunate to get that call. And this marks my 8th year at Milton, and kind of like what Coach said, it's about impact and connection. I mean, when you're working with these kids every day, this time of year specifically, when you first start and you get into practices, when you see those lights go off, the light come on when you're trying to teach a certain skill or different things. It kind of comes when that light goes off or comes on. You're really excited because that's part of that impact and that connection, and you're being able to help that kid achieve that and even more as you continue to grow through that. So for me, it's all about impact and connection.
That's awesome. So you're impacting your own program, obviously, and the community surrounding it, but also recently you were appointed as the president of the NHSBCA. Would you mind sharing with the audience a little bit about what that role is in the organization?
Yeah, it's here in Georgia back during COVID, we started the Georgia Basketball Coaches Association, and I was leading that charge. And as we got involved with the NHSBCA, myself specifically, I took on a lot of leadership roles of that. We created, a coaching mentor program, and here recently we're growing programs to try to help people just learn the way the game's changing. Just trying to help high school athletes, high school parents, just to understand that we as the NHSBCA, just like the NABC, we're trying to help coaches grow and trying to connect and help athletes, specifically basketball players, just understand what the map is, what it looks like, and how you navigate those things. But, we're partnered with 28.5, which is for women's basketball. We're trying to create a bigger following for women's basketball nationally. So I think it's all inclusive. It's a holistic approach. Just trying to help coaches, help athletes, and that's really the backbone of the NHSBCA, is just trying to help people, just trying to grow the game, trying to have an impact in every way that we can.
Awesome. Thank you for that, Coach. And then last but not least, from the very northeastern part of the country, we have Coach Mannix, Wilbraham and Munson Academy. Tell us about yourself and what's going on in your neck of the woods.
Yeah, thanks, Marshall. This will be my 24th year in coaching. Actually got started coaching a local high school when I was in college at UMass, and while working for the team there on campus while I was a student. This will be my 16th year at Wilbraham Munson. So 24 years on the sideline in one capacity or another. I think I've been a member of the NABC for maybe 17 or 16 of those 24 years. And worked in the NBA for 1 year, worked in college basketball for 4 years. Like I've said, been here for 16 years. And I think the main drive for me coming back to high school basketball and leaving college basketball was, honestly, I think it was, let's really dig in and be hands-on with basketball and maybe a little less administrative. I think, Coach Rubio could attest to, there's a lot of administrata that goes along with being a college coach. And so got a little sick of that, I guess, and just wanted to teach the game. Right. And so to go back, to Dave and Alan's points of just being teachers, I really miss just teaching the game a little bit more and being more hands-on. And so found my way to a boarding school 16 years ago, and helping these guys realize their dreams of playing college basketball. I liken it to watching your sons or daughters open up Christmas presents, when they get the one they really want, to share that moment as a coach with a player when they realize, and I guess, with college basketball, that's kind of the first step of their dream when they commit. It really does feel like Christmas morning for them. And you really do feel like a parent, like a dad, when you just step back and watch that. And so I'm lucky to be, along with those journeys. of all the guys I've coached here in all those years. So I think, that's the end of it, but really the journey of high school coaching, again, to like what Dave and Alan said, are just, it's a very impactful time in young men, young women's lives. And, it's really important that we have good people in those positions.
Yeah, that's incredible. One of the reasons we gone with this model of having 3 coaches, we did the same thing last webinar, just even the geographic diversity, but having private school coaches, public school coaches, and even prep school coaches on. One of you said that the game is changing, right? So just from your vantage point geographically, or where you're at a private school, whether it's a public school or a prep school, like in what ways do you coaches see the game changing or having changed in recent years?
I think the recruiting process has really changed due to NIL as well as the portal. I think with high school kids, the recruiting process of how it looked originally has changed dramatically, and those kids now, coaches are looking for transfers as much as they're looking for high school athletes. So now that dynamic has changed a little bit. So kids, the recruiting process is almost tiered, if you will. I mean, that's what I see here in Atlanta.
Yeah.
Just kind of touching on Alan's point, in Southern California, and obviously it varies because I think it impacts differently depending on where you're at. But in Southern California, there's no association rules, so we can practice, we can kind of play. But if we play, you have to be a club. But if we played other high schools that are in a state association, nobody can come. Like parents can come, but if you play a prep school, college coaches can be there because they could put that on their schedule, which kind of applies pressure on college coaches. I mean, high school coaches, like, well, hey, there's a big tournament that this prep school's running, and coaches will be there, come play. But then you're in this like, okay, well, I'm taking my team to go play games that don't matter in September, but there's college coaches there, and it's like, wait a second, this isn't supposed to matter right now. Like, we're not supposed to we're trying to figure each other out still a little bit. But I think it also kind of lends the you're kind of bringing meat to the butcher. You're taking your team and your players, and they get to sit in front of these preps that have no rules, or whatever, can do whatever and bring on and add. And I think it creates a unique dynamic. So I think that's something that, like, we've been talking about in Southern California, just about like, how do we manage this, and how does and when is it too much? I think those are topics of conversation, and the cat's out of the bag here, right? And I think Alan, you hit it best. Like NIL, transfer portal, agents, this, that. It's not about fighting those things. It's about managing, I think, and helping and being as informative as we can. So those have been my conversations, battles, and thoughts.
Okay.
Yeah, Marshall, I would just chime in and say, to kind of go off of both coaches' points, one of their main points, is the recruiting thing right now, college placement, right? And it's become, I think we could say, in short, like, it's become more difficult, especially for those that have like scholarship aspirations. But I'm hopeful, I guess, in a way, and I think talking to some other coaches, we've seen some signs of it. I've seen some of our guys here and guys in our region up here in the Northeast. It seems like the mindset is starting to turn the corner, and there's been a little bit of an uptick in the understanding of playing Division III basketball or Division II basketball is also a really special opportunity, because their recruiting, it's been a domino effect. So whatever conference you want to take from maybe the last third of Division I basketball, they're getting high level transfers. So now kids that used to go there out of high school, now we see this domino effect, this trickle down effect, where Division II and Division III schools are picking up these kids that used to be scholarship level, evaluated kids out of high school. And knock on wood, I see more of my guys every year, especially over the last 3 years, I would say, starting to come to grips with, man, if I could play at this Division III school. Maybe it's a top 25 Division III school. That's a pretty special opportunity. So it's interesting to, you know, I'll be really interested to see where we are 3 years from now.
Right.
You know, to see if we turn the corner even more on that. But yeah, it's definitely changed, and coaches, you have no choice but to change with it, right? So
Yeah. This is kind of a follow-up question for, I guess, Dave and Alan. You know, for both of you guys, I know, you know, you're leading these Nike Elite high school programs. A lot of the players you do have aspirations to play at next level. For a lot of our audience in the NABC high school membership, you know, maybe we get a Division I player every 5 years or 10 years, or majority of the players, you know, most high school coaches coach, you know, play through the high school years. So for those players like in your roster who have, you know, whose careers will end, and as they're in the midst of all these guys who are recruited at the high level, mid-major level, D1, D2, D3, what are some things that you're trying to have impact on those guys as their high school journeys are going through?
You know, for us, you don't know if I'm talking to our 13th or our top guy, right? I think, and it's something I learned early on as a coach. Like, the more I gave to the other guys, the more the better guys wanted, right? And then the more I just put into the better guys, and the more I let the other guys get away with, you know, the better guys were like, get off me, like, he's doing the same, you know. And I just found that, like, when you create this level playing field in how you approach your team, listen, everybody's different, right? And everybody handles things differently. But how the expectation of everybody needs to be the same. With that being said, we sit and meet with our guys 3 times a year. We sit and meet with them in the summertime, get a feel for, hey, how are things? Where are you at? You know, okay, what are some goals you have heading into the summer? Great. Then we have a meeting right about this time. We'll actually start them next week. Hey, so let's talk about your goals. Let's talk about where you're at. What are you thinking for college? And then we can have a realistic conversation, because at our school, college is currency. Harvard Westlake, like, it's currency, man. It matters. It's a big deal. Not that it doesn't matter to everybody else, but it's a thing. And so we try to gauge that, and I try to get a feel and try to help guys. Like, hey, I think I really want to go to Rice. I don't really want to give up basketball, but I know I'm not a scholarship guy. Can I be a manager? Could I be a this? Now the walk-on thing that's talking about the ever-changing landscape, walk-ons maybe are going away, but, you know, are you really going to fill a roster of 15 dudes? We'll see. You know, you might need some culture guys, buying guys. So those are some of the ways that we try and make sure we're communicating. We communicate, we create a standard, and then we make sure they know they're loved and appreciated and valued. And I think when you're doing that, it creates you know, people say culture a lot, but it creates a standard. And that standard is your culture. So I think that those are the big things for me in our program.
To follow up on what he said, I mean, you know, when you're doing it the right way, I think it is that impact, like Coach was saying, it's the level playing field, holding everybody accountable. We always talk about the working lab, you know, for kids. Is he getting his jump shots up? Is he working on his game? But more importantly, we do something at Milton called the lab. It's life after basketball. And we bring people in from different walks of life to talk to them about careers. It could be about leadership. It could be about just opportunities off the court, but that are part of the court. And I think that's been a big thing. We've got a young man who played for us last year who, this is a shout out to Phil. He loves analytics and all the breakdown of the game. He's with Bucky down at Samford in their analytics department down there. So when you start seeing those things transpire through what you've done and what you put into the program, it kind of, you know, it's that extension, all those kids. And then, you know, when you start getting those, and we've all been doing this a while, when you start getting those invites to weddings, you know, former players calling you, even ones that weren't your stars. I mean, kids that are calling you, I call them kids still, but grown men call you so excited to let you know they've had their first child. Those are the things when you know you're doing it the right way. And then, you know, that old adage, the scoreboard takes care of itself. I think if you're doing it that way and you've got kids that know you love them, they let you coach them harder. And then you're able to get more out of them, and the standard stays really high. And I agree with Coach. I mean, it's not really a culture for me. I think that's a buzzword that gets worn out in basketball, because I think, and people argue with this with me, but I think your culture changes yearly because you've got a different dynamic with different people within your roster every year. People graduate, new kids come in. So you're continuously trying to keep that standard of how you operate. And you try to stay away from satisfaction and complacency, and you just continue to try to grow and keep pouring into these young men.
That's awesome. Moving on. Thank you for those, both of you, for that answer. Coach Mannix, we'll start with you here. I know it's a little bit different maybe with the scheduling for prep schools, but games are coming up soon. You're prepping, you got your workouts, your practices, what have you. What's the biggest priority in your program at this time of the school year?
Well, I think, of course, like generally speaking, creating good habits, right? And you know, we hate to focus too much on the negative, but it's also getting rid of bad habits, and we do have to spend some time doing that. I'm sure Alan and Dave all have new players, right? So new players come from different places, and not that every habit that they have is a bad habit. It might just not fit exactly what we do. But really, that bad habit thing is a really big deal, because I can look back at every single year here that I've had, and every deficiency, or probably almost every deficiency that our team has shown, even good teams, you can trace back to a bad habit that wasn't coached out of them. And I can look back on I mean, I could look back, Marshall, probably 10 years, talk about a team, identify, like in my mind's eye, what their deficiency was, what our downfall was. And I could go back to September and say, that was on me for not addressing it in September and getting rid of it and turning it into something positive, or just eliminating it, across the board. So I think, that's what we're trying to do. Like, we try to identify some weaknesses, try to neutralize those right now. And then in our strengths, like, really, figure out exactly what our strengths mean, how that plays out X's and O's wise. Because here in prep school, you do get some time with your guys on the court in the fall, which is nice. So you are able to, kind of figure out some things. So, that's generally speaking what we're trying to do, is really identify some bad habits that we have either individually or as a group, and address those right now, just to kind of remove maybe some of our shortcomings.
Not to probe deeper and give any strategic advantages to your league opponents who might be tuned in tonight, but how about a bad habit you stomped out last year, team, or didn't? What's an example of a bad habit to you?
One jumps right off the page. I've probably told about 3 or 4 of my closest friends in coaching about this. I never really thought we were going to have to take charges, teach how to take charges.
Interesting. Okay.
It still bugs me at my core that I even have to say this right now, that we had to do that, right? But we statted some things just through the first couple games of the year. And I mean, I knew, as soon as we sat down in whatever coaches meeting it was to talk about this issue, and everybody in the room knew we had this many at that point. We had taken that many charges a couple games into the year. It was concerning, but then we started to go back and we started to look at, we were called for even very few blocks. So
you're not even attempting to take them. Yeah.
We had a problem. So we went on our short Thanksgiving break at that point. And when we came back, Dave had mentioned before we went live on the call about effort practices. Dave, there were a couple effort practices that week. Well, I'll tell you, effort comes in different shapes and sizes. These might have been a little black. So yeah, that was one, Marshall. It pains me to even talk about it, but yeah.
That's amazing. But that's a great segue. Yeah.
Well, I
You
was just
got
saying,
it,
Coach
Coach.
mentioned this real quick, and I think it's something unique because it just kind of created an epiphany for me. But like you talk about breaking habits, but sometimes you're breaking habits that you created too, because role definition changes. And you know, you've got a guy who you kind of needed him to stay in that space and do those things that way because it worked for that team. But then you get into a space where now I've got a break, and he's fighting you on it because it's like, hey, dude, you did this to me. You
Yeah.
know, like you did it. Like it's not me. You made me be this way. And it's like,
Yes.
you're right. But then I need you to be this now, right? And I think it's not something we you know, I think I would say that I venture to say we kind of pass the buck on it on times because it's like, yeah, but I'm telling you to do this now. And you know, you're not doing it. And you do it with this guy to do it. You know, it's just kind of like it becomes this like tug of war when it's like, hey, you know what? Let's really address it and let's, you know, I don't know. It was an epiphany. I thought it was a great opportunity to talk about it for coaching development, just in general.
Yeah. Just one last question, Coach, before I go to Alan. How many effort practices can you have this time of the year? And how many have you had over? How many would you average over a course of a year
Is that
on a
for
good
me or
team?
for
Yeah, that's for you, Dave.
you know, I I think when you're running your program, most coaches have an idea of where they want their teams to be at specific points, right?
Right.
In the summertime, I can tell you we need to be pretty sharp defensively, understanding spot spacing, understanding, you know, where we need to be gaps wise and gap principles and things like that. But offensively, like we don't do much. It's skill development. It is basic read and react, and it's hey, we're going to coach you and play through it. And so, you know, in those situations, we're coaching and we're teaching and kind of. But now you approach the spring, and I think once you get to October,
Yeah,
I think if you're not seeing things start to click, it might be time to start hammering. And if it takes 2 weeks, it's 2 weeks. If it takes two practices, if it takes one
yeah,
practice, I think that's by team, by coach, by
yep.
you know, it varies. I can tell you, we had a tough weekend last weekend, and we were supposed to only have three practices this week. We added a fourth, and our last 3 days have been 2 hours nonstop black and blue compete and go, and it's been good. And I think now we've created a standard, right?
Yep.
And I think when you get really good is when you avoid going back to these practices because they understand the standard and you hold them to that standard.
Yep.
Hey, Marshall, can I just jump in for 10 seconds?
Sure. Absolutely.
It's a saying that definitely takes on an old school kind of flavor to it.
Okay.
But about 15 years ago, I listened to an interview with an old football coach, Mike Ditka. And he summed it up perfectly. I remember where I was in the car listening to this interview, and he said, "You get what you tolerate." And here I am 15 years later. I can still picture myself driving in the car listening to that interview. And it was like, you know, Dave mentioned before, like kind of like a ooh kind of moment, like this made me think of something. That's all I could think about on my ride home after I heard that. Because I do remember that season as well where we were, I think, tolerating maybe a bit too much. And I've never forgotten that. So you get what you tolerate, and that can absolutely be applied to the bad habits part, right?
You know, to go off of that, Coach, I've got an older coach who's just tough as nails, and he always says, you teach it or tolerate it. One of the two you're going to do. You're going to teach the way it's supposed to be done, or you're going to tolerate how it's going to be done. You've got to decide between the two.
Love
That's
that.
beautiful. Love that. By the way, for the viewers, yours, you know, I am taking notes. I am a moderator, but also, you know, this is really just a clinic, you know, for me to take away notes from these three wise coaches. So if you guys have any questions, put them into the into the chat function if you have it, or submit it, and we'll try to see if we can address those for you. Moving on. Here's a question for each of you guys. So the off season is behind you, and the season is ahead. But what are some things when you just for a minute look back on your off season and say like this particular year that it was time well spent for each of you? Like, what are some things that you focused on and you're seeing the fruits of it? Let's keep this positive, So what are some things that you guys like seeing out of your group that you've invested time in since April?
I think for us, it was just connection. I feel like a lot of these kids, they play with AAU, they play so many games in a year, and I'm on them all the time to slow down, when certain things happen, just to take it in. There's many times they laugh, but even in the summer, and we go pretty hard in the month of June, and there's sometimes I'll cut the week short and say, hey, go be a kid. Just go to the pool, go hang out. This game takes a lot out of you and you give a lot to it. And occasionally I think it's just to reconnect with who you are and the people you're around. So I think this past off season, we did a lot of connecting and giving them time to just be kids. I feel like like we talked about it, with the ever changing roadmap of basketball and recruiting and NIL and portal, there's so much stress in it for a lot of these kids, especially the ones that have high aspirations and that are really good players, with Division I coming down the pipeline. Because when you get to college, it's a job. When you get to the Division I level, especially if you're a high major, this money that they're throwing at them now is great, but it is a job at that point. And, you're trying to let them hang on to childhood for as much as they can, just to enjoy the moment. So we're just talking about connection a lot.
Okay.
I feel like with the way things are set up now and how much travel you can do in a high school season, we even, we have 2 live period events in June where we travel as a team. And so connection's a big thing, and getting time together, I think, is huge. But for us, I think that's kind of a built-in staple. Like, people ask me, like, what do you do for a retreat? And I go, we travel to 3 events in the winter, and then we travel to 2 events in the fall, and then we go on 2 events in the summer. We're always together on retreat, just competing. And so I think, that kind of helps the schedule, and the NCAA schedule and all that stuff kind of helps that. For us in April, we want to put an emphasis on situational passing, things that we know, like, hey, going left, shuffle screen, being able to hit that big on the run and in his pocket where we want him to catch and lay it up. And so I think every week we would create 2 situations in practice that were, sequenced, but things that we knew we'd try to do within our offense, and put coaches in the way and kind of put hands up and, hey, throw the ball. Let's be perfect with our passing, almost kind of like we call it like quarterbacking. Hey, we want you to quarterback that ball into the net in that specific spot and get it there. And hey, but you're going left this time, so you got to throw with your left hand on the run, and we made all 5 positions do it, just so we got better at passing and seeing and understanding situational passing. I think that was something that we put a major emphasis on, and I think I hope it'll pay dividends later on.
Okay.
One thing for us, Marshall, was we graduated last year, a pretty large senior class, 4 out of 5 starters, and those guys are pretty vocal. So we have the 2 June live period events. We bring our guys to campus, and we took some time as coaches where we intentionally put in some drills where we didn't talk at all, besides maybe very briefly, like an introduction. And then we let the guys kind of talk through the drills a little bit and direct one another. And it was some fast-paced stuff, so they kind of had to talk, on the fly. And it was really just intended to get not only quiet guys, but guys that had lesser roles than they'll have this year, used to talking to one another, used to filling up the gym with some sound. And knock on wood, so far this fall seems like it's carried over. So it's been a huge positive for us.
It's awesome.
I love that.
I have our first question for you all. This is from our friend Matt Elkin, who's on the staff up at Stanford University. former high school coach for a long time as well. Have you guys noticed any significant changes in the willingness to be coached and the ability to be coached, or the basketball IQ of the players you've coached over your years? How have those things changed, given social media influences and etc.?
I've noticed that younger players coming in have a tougher time adapting to a systematic style of play, or basic concepts and rules. And I think a lot of that is just based on they play so much and they're going to an event every weekend or camp or this. And like, I mean, I think I saw something where they're trying to rank fourth graders the other day. And it's like, okay, and so the pressure is individual based and it's not substance based. And I think that has created a drop off in IQ. But early on in my return to high school and coaching at Harvard Westlake, I made a conscientious decision that if you're not willing to be coached, don't come here. And I'm willing to lose you because I'm going to sleep at night. And if you're coming here, your goal is to go to play in college, and I'm not going to set you up for failure. You may not like it. You may not find great, but I'm going to do it the way I think it needs to be done. And I think when those boundaries are set and those guidelines are set and those parameters are set, you get buy-in, or they don't come, and that's even better, right? Because I do think players, once they get coached, want to continue to be coached, especially great ones, especially ones who have a vision. So that's what I've kind of seen, and that's been our philosophy programmatically.
Is that something? Sorry to interrupt, Coach Whitehart. Is that something you think you could have said it early in your years at El Camino when you're a younger coach? For those younger coaches who are watching and saying, "Well, Coach, you're David Rubio and you're at Harvard Westlake. You can come out and say that." But is that something that's been consistent for you over the years? And how would you encourage a young coach hearing what you just said?
I was 23 years old when I was hired at El Camino, and I knew nothing. I had a great mentor who took care of me. I knew nothing. But what I established early on was that we were going to get better, and we were going to find ways and give our guys as much as we could. Like, I mean, we even set up gym time that I paid for out of my own pocket, and I was making $3,500 a year, where every Sunday we had gym time for our guys to just go play pickup. Like, go play pickup. Here you go. It's set up. You need workouts. Here are the days our coaches are in the gym and things like that. And we created an environment that forced you to get better, right? With that, though, you're a young coach and you think winning solves everything. And look, in some cases it does, right? It's hard. Like, what is a parent going to come and talk to me about in regards to player development? Like, you want to have that conversation? Let's have it, because we won enough, right? But I think any coach would be delusional, young or old, to think that you have to be approachable and you have to be willing to have the conversation. But you have to also know where your boundaries are and create boundaries. And I think that's where coaches lose, is when they don't, because then it goes too far one way or the other. And as long as you set those boundaries, I think you're giving yourself an opportunity to grow, to learn, because it's trial by error. There's no same situation. Everybody's different. Everything's unique. It's a new era. It's a new time. And everybody can think I'm great, but we've had some really good players too. So that factors in and matters, and fostering that, but also understanding, like, this is what it's going to be. And we just need to be on page. Here are the non-negotiables.
Coach Whitehart, I cut you off earlier.
No, it's fine. Really along the lines of Coach Rubio, I mean, we tell our kids that we have kids who come in and want to come to Milton and play, and we say the deal is no deal, the standard is the standard. And what we mean by that is exactly what he said. And then people say, well, you can say that you've won and you're a veteran coach, but It's really about your non-negotiables. It's your non-negotiables. What are the things you're willing to just negotiate or have conversation about? And then the ones that are just standard based, you're not willing to negotiate on. And I think and any young coach, I think as a young coach, I was learning what those non-negotiables were. And now as I'm a veteran coach, I get reinforcement. I mean, I'm having it tonight. Like he just gave me reinforcement from the other side of the country. But I think the big thing for young coaches is they've got to reach out to people that have already been in their shoes. And all the people I'm in contact with, they're all willing to share. All three of us are on here tonight, and both of them after a practice. So that just goes to show you how willing they are to pour in to younger coaches. So I think that's the big part of it. But I think it's the non-negotiables and the way you set up the standards in your program. And I think that's what establishes your parameters, like Coach was talking about. And then you set up those parameters, and you have an open mind and you have an open door, so you are approachable. And I think that sets up that baseline for how your program is going to run and how you can facilitate through all those potential problems.
Marshall, I think one thing to approach it from a little bit of a different angle, I think the kids that we're seeing come in are having a little bit more difficult of a time in this era with pushing through failure. We all get transfers to one degree or another, but in prep school, it's kind of the name of the game. You either get post-grad transfers, or for whatever reason, we get a lot of 11th grade reclassified juniors transfers.
Yep.
And so those guys have played 3 and 4 years of high school basketball already. And part of Matt's question was social media and what part has that played in this. The world has never seen them make a mistake.
They're not posting highlights of their misses.
There is no highlights of turning the ball over like it's on fire. Yeah. Right? So, you come in now, and so, the social media world, the people that have never seen them play in person, which is probably the majority of the people that see them are wondering, what they're going to do, or how they'll do. They've never seen them make a mistake, and so now this kid in their own mind has certain expectations of who they are, and if all of a sudden they kind of run into that brick wall their first year here, I'm seeing kids definitely have a more difficult time figuring that out. So my role has changed with that, where like we've all been problem solvers, right? From the minute that you picked up, your first practice plan, you were a problem solver in some way, shape, or form. I think that part of that role within the big role of coaching, I think for me, that's grown in how often I'm a problem solver in that one kind of thing, where failure is a little bit harder to, you don't want a kid to accept failure, so that's not the right term, but just kind of like, okay, it happens, right? Now what? But I think they get it's a little bit more of a punch in the gut these days when they fail than it used to be, where it would kind of be like, okay, get knocked down, get up, here we go. Now it's like they're on the mat for a little while longer and they need a little bit more help getting up.
Just as a follow-up for that, for what each of you shared, like what is it in your minds, like a good ratio when you're setting up practices to set up drills where your guys are going to fail? And where do you at what point of the season before that first game do you want them to have reached that goal, or kind of feel like they've turned a corner? So, coach has been on my butt about this, like the whole, the last 2 months. It just feels like we can't get to it. Like what is that crescendo? When is that moment when you think for each of your programs that needs to happen?
I think in my program, and we set them up for failure occasionally.
Okay.
And we know it's unattainable, but what we're looking for is effort. Sometimes it's not about making the time or finishing the drill. It's about how much effort you put into trying to complete the task. So we'll set up different drills within what we do in our practice plans. And after the fact, they're down on themselves. And I'm like, well, guys, you just beat your previous record. You didn't know this, but you beat what you've done before. by whatever. And it's about that growing, because there's so, kids, like, you even look in a classroom, kids are clock watchers. They are looking at the clock, how much time's left. And I'm continuously telling my team, we're not trying to get through practice, we're trying to get from practice. What are you getting from this drill rather than trying to complete this drill? Are you getting maximum effort? Are you really refining what skill set we're looking at? Or are you just trying to get reps to get through it? So it's rather than 100 reps, we want one rep 100 times, right? We want the good one rep multiple times rather than the mediocre rep 30 times, 40 times, whatever it is. So that's kind of how we approach it.
I think pending the phase that you're in the year, you can kind of play with this, and pending where your team's at. If you've got a really competitive team, and there's a great spirit about how they compete, I think you need to set them up for some failure, because you have to see how they're going to respond, number one. And then number two, adversity builds character and brings out the best or the worst in people, right? And as coaches, that's data that's you can't put a value on. And I think we're constantly seeking that out now. In the summertime, we're pushing some things, but we're really just trying to get an idea of like, hey, where are we really at? And the time, because we're preparing for those 2 live periods, we want our guys to be successful. So it's kind of like Disneyland, right? And then you get to the fall and it's a little more like Magic Mountain, a little scarier. And then you progressively get scarier. And then we get to a point where it's like, hey, we're comfortable now. And no. We're gonna stop being comfortable, and we're gonna get into the do it exactly how we're asking you to do it. And we're gonna nitpick it and grind you until we do it. And then, hey, you know what? I can tell you from last year's team, we had a veteran ball club. We were really good. I set us up for failure. We flew across country in January to play in the Hoop Hall East on a Monday, knowing that Wednesday and Friday we had Notre Dame and Sierra Canyon. Getting back Tuesday morning, we went to school Tuesday. We got a 35-minute practice in before playing Notre Dame at home in front of a sellout crowd. Led majority of the game, lost by 5. Thursday, we barely did anything. Friday, go to Sierra, led majority of the game, lost by 5. And I had a weekend of like, that's on me. But what beat us? Did fatigue beat us, or did our discipline, like in certain aspects? And fatigue played a part. But we were pretty undisciplined in situational things as a veteran ball club, where you're like, hey, we needed to grind that out. We could have done that. I'm talking box outs, ball discipline, situational discipline. And so for 2 days, we cranked it up to the point where we were playing a league opponent on the following Wednesday. And I had 2 starters just go boom into each other trying to pursue rebounds, because rebounding was one of our value things that we wanted for those 2 days of practice. And they're on the floor falling, and I'm clapping, and we didn't lose the game the rest of the year from that point. So I think it's kind of knowing your team to that point.
Yeah.
Marshall, I'll just stop real quick and piggyback here off of what they said. I mean, or these guys made some great points. I'll just add in that I think it's really important for coaches to have drills where you're designed to fail as an entire group. Not like red versus white or, anything like that, or 1 through 5, 6 versus 10.
I like that.
Second part is, I would say, leave some dead air after you fail, because that might be the greatest time or your best opportunity to identify who the leaders are going to be early on. So when you fail, give it a minute as a coach and shut up and see who speaks up, because that's probably your best opportunity early on to pinpoint 1 or 2 kids on the team and say, that might be the voice.
Like that. We have another question here. And I think Coach Whitehart, we can go with you. I know you have a lot of football players as well. What percentage of your players play another sport besides basketball? And what are some advantages of having that type of roster?
So fortunately for me this year, this will be the first time I haven't had a football player
Oh, wow.
on my team, which I'm excited about for the first time. But don't get me wrong, I love
Yeah.
multi-sport athletes. I
Yeah.
mean, back in 21 when we were really, really good, we had the #1 football player in the country. And
Right.
I mean, he was a grown man, and he gave us our toughness. I mean, he gave us our identity. I mean, when we were playing the Montverts, we were playing the IMGs. I mean, he was in there just he was a man amongst boys. And it was obvious when you saw him in there mixing it up. But I think they give you that, but also they give you another coach's wisdom. And what I mean by that, they're in another locker room that a lot of your other kids are not in. So they're getting the wisdom from other coaches that are being poured into them in another sport. And they're able to bring not only what you're giving and pouring, but they're able to bring what those other coaches are pouring. And I think that's invaluable too, because you can't be in every locker room. Tonight, like you, Marshall, I've been taking notes, man. I'm excited because I picked up some great things from these guys. Just for me, because it's about learning, and I think those other sport athletes enhance the learning of your athletes who only play basketball.
Yeah, I love that. Last question of the evening, coaches. Now I'll go right back to you, Alan. I think this is something that's been an emphasis over at the NHSBCA as well. How is sportsmanship emphasized in your program? And really, is there a distinction between like pushing sportsmanship, or at the cost of like having, that edge of competition, that, that rough around the edge, edge kind of character of a team? How is that emphasized at the Milton program?
Yeah, I think it starts with the coach. For me, I'm as competitive. I mean, I'm going to shake your hand before the game, shake your hand after the game. I'm going to be very respectful to you and your kids because everybody's laying it on the line. Everybody wants the same goal. They want to win the game. But I think when you're in between those lines, you compete at such a high level that the respect factor, if both teams are competing and laying it on the line, I think the respect factor is there. I've never, with the way we run our program, we say respect them all, fear no one, but definitely respect them because they're doing the same thing or trying to accomplish what you're accomplishing. And we talk about that regularly as we go into games. And I just think the way we approach it and how hard we play, we just respect our opponent as much as we respect the game.
I think with us, Marshall, I guess to make a distinction, I don't worry too much about, maybe some of the talk and forth. I think there's a clear line when it becomes a problem, when it's just kind of sometimes part of the game, right? Maybe just a little bit of jawing back and forth here and there. But our rule that we're pretty steadfast on is you don't talk to the referees. And I think that's a big part of sportsmanship. And then you talked about losing that edge. I think talking to the referees is showing that you're losing your edge because you're worried about something else now, right? And you could make a case for you're starting to make excuses and you're showing it. And you're getting rattled, whatever phrase you want to use, right? So with us, it's just plain and simple. Don't talk to the referees. Like there's no need to do it. So, don't do it. And then therefore it can't get to that point where it's unhealthy or it becomes a technical foul and it becomes, a consequence for your team or negative for your team. So, I think we know what's good and bad with some of the talking back and forth, and then we just don't talk to the officials.
For us, it starts in practice, I think, because we try and create a competitive environment, and you've got guys competing for minutes, competing for shots, competing for whatever they're competing with. And then at the end, we huddle up and everyone's got to check out. And our checkout is you knuckle and you look everybody in the eye, good, bad, or indifferent. You say, good job. And so like we start it really early because, hey, there's nothing worse than 2-hour practice with the guy who knows everything the way and how you do it, right? There's nothing more frustrating. Losing a game in front of a lot of people sucks and we all have emotions, but that every single day and having to do that, I think helps us establish a guideline for how we handle ourselves when that jersey's on, right? And then in general, like attitude reflects leadership, right? I mean, you guys have touched on it already. how you handle yourself, how you respond, who you're interacting with during the games, how you interact. It's all indicative of how your team's going to respond, right? If I'm whining, they're whining. If I'm yelling, they're upset. You know what I mean? If I'm talking to the crowd, they're talking to the crowd. I've never seen something bad happen in a basketball game and it not start somewhere, and probably start with the coach in some capacities because of how they handle the situation or whatever the case may be. So I think that's all invaluable. But at the end of the day, I think throughout your year, you're constantly setting a standard for character, right? And character development. And I think the little things that you can steal for that, like, hey, we had a kid who wore the wrong practice shorts. Well, he had to push a towel for 35 minutes, right? If I'm making that kid do that for that, you think that other kid wants to test me with how he, getting a unwarranted ejection or whatever the case may be, So I just think it's those standards and the constant reminders of what your expectations are for your team and your program. I think that lends to character development.
Marshall, I'll add to that. When I was a young coach, probably my first year at Buford, my athletic director, Dexter Wood, he actually played for Bear Bryant, won 2 national championships at Alabama with him. And I was on the sideline in a heavy, heavy game, real close, losing my mind. And I felt like my grandfather grabbed the back of my arm, and it was him. And he said, listen, you lose your mind, they lose theirs. And it's kind of stuck with me as I've become a veteran coach. And you try to keep your demeanor to a level of locked in, but also in control, because if you're coaching in control, most times your teams are playing in control.
Sorry, I had myself muted here, but coaches, that was incredible. Just really an hour of I got a bunch of notes myself. Hopefully the folks who tuned in got a lot out of it. I didn't ask each of you before we started, but I know that each of you are givers of the game. If there's like a way for coaches who might want to reach out to you for a follow-up question or come watch practice, would you guys mind maybe just sharing your information, a way for coaches to get in touch with you?
Yeah. I'll give everybody my cell phone number now, and feel free to put it in the notes, Marshall, if you want. My cell's
Okay.
215-510-9543. Anybody ever, wants to chat or, whatever, if you're in the area, you want to stop by the school and have lunch, feel free, hit me up. Love to be able to meet and, talk to any coaches we can.
Coach, can you repeat your number?
Yep.
Can you repeat your number?
Yeah, 215-510-9543.
And you're on Twitter as well, and you host spaces, correct? Just a plug.
Yeah, that's right. We're in a little bit of a slow point of the year, but real quick, about 3 years ago, 3 years ago almost, myself with one of my former players and another local Division III college coach, we decided kind of on the back end of COVID, let's do one of these live Twitter spaces, and we call it the coaching ladder. And Monday nights, we're gonna kind of reboot it here. We've been off for about a month, but we're supposed to hopefully be back on this Monday or next. And we just have a college basketball coach of some capacity, head, assistant, sometimes ops guys, Division III, Division II, whatever, a couple NBA guys on, and we just talk about career path. And we've had some great ones, and made a lot of connections through listeners and guests that I didn't know before they became guests. So yeah, if anybody's ever interested, if we got any guys, I don't know who's part of the attendees, but anybody ever wants to be a guest, let me know. We'd love to talk to you about your career path. There's some really interesting ones out there.
Marshall, for me, same thing, cell phone. What I do ask though, sometimes some calls come in. If you'll just text me before you call, and I'll know you're calling, but my cell number is 678-697-2887. Again, 678-697-2887. And then my Twitter handle is @WhiteHeartHoops. I spread everything and anything. I probably still more to share on there than is my own actual thought. If I see something that really resonates, I'm gonna forward it on because I feel like it's a part of growing the game. But I am willing to share anything I have unless you're in my region. Yeah, but I'm a junkie. I'm 24/7, 365. I do go shoot terrible scores in golf for relaxation, but other than that, I'm basketball all the time. So I'm willing to help anybody with anything. So please feel free to reach out.
Love it. Love it.
Yes, same. If I can ever be a resource, or you need something, I think what Coach said about the texting before the call. I mean, the amount of spam I get a day, and someone's like, "Hey, you said the call at this time," and I'm like, "Yeah, well, okay." But my cell is 818-634-2743. 818-634-2743, and my email's D in my last name, Rebibo, REBIBO @hw.com. I think my Twitter's D.Rebibo, very creative. And so yeah, whatever I can be a resource to or of, and I love talking hoops. I love learning and appreciate this and this time and helping grow the game and helping coaches. So loved it.
No, that was big time by all of you guys, and hopefully, the reward for the coaches who stayed up until the end. But it's no surprise. Just having been around the high school coaches, some of the best in the country are just like you guys. They're open, to learning, but also open to sharing, everything that you've gained over the years. So, just thank you again for this time. Really appreciate it. We're done for tonight, but hopefully we'll even get a chance to get you guys around back again soon. So for everybody, thanks again for joining today's webinar. I especially want to thank our speakers and our partners, FastModel, for making this happen. If you missed any of the webinar, it will be available on demand in the coming days at nabc.com. Thanks again and enjoy your evening.